Netflix's true crime documentary, Memories of a Murderer. The Nilsen tapes delves deep into the chilling case of Dennis Nilsen, a convicted serial killer who preyed on young men, particularly targeting those from marginalized communities such as the LGBTQ+ community, sex workers, and homeless youth. The underlying tragedy of this story lies not only in the shocking number of lives lost, but also in the culture of intolerance that allowed Nilsen to operate for years without being apprehended. Nilsen's modus operandi was horrifyingly simple. He would lure his victims with the promise of food and shelter, exploiting their vulnerability and need for assistance. Once they were in his grasp, he would murder them. Nilsen's background as an ex-cop likely granted him an understanding of the flaws within the system, knowing that their disappearances might not be immediately investigated. Due to the prevailing culture of shame surrounding the LGBTQ+ community in 1980s London. During that time, many young gay individuals were forced to run away or were expelled from their homes, leaving their parents unaware of their whereabouts. Moreover, even if their parents did notice their absence, the fear of societal judgment and potential discrimination discouraged them from reporting the disappearances to the police. Institutions like the police and the press, historically plagued by homophobia, further exacerbated this culture of silence and reluctance to seek justice. Within the documentary, Nilsen admitted to as many as 16 killings, but only 8 of his victims have been identified. Shockingly, he was able to continue his spree from 1978 to 1983, even though some of his intended victims managed to escape. One survivor recounted his harrowing experience, where he flung himself through a window to escape Nilsen's clutches. However, due to fear of homophobia, he chose not to press charges, perpetuating the cycle of silence and impunity. Another survivor, Carl Stoddard, narrowly escaped death in 1981 when Nilsen inexplicably released him. Stoddard had the courage to go to the police, hoping for justice to be served. Tragically, his claims were dismissed, leaving him disillusioned and unheard. This lack of trust in the authorities further highlights the far-reaching consequences of a culture mired in intolerance and discrimination. Memories of a Murderer. The Nilsen tapes not only exposes the chilling crimes of Dennis Nilsen, but also serves as a stark reminder of the profound impact that intolerance can have on society. Lives were needlessly lost as victims, trapped in the crosshairs of prejudice, found themselves abandoned and unheard. It is essential to confront the dark realities of the past to ensure a more inclusive and just future, where every life is valued and protected, regardless of one's sexual orientation or circumstances. Even when Nilsen faced trial, following his arrest in 1983, the prosecution struggled to find witnesses willing to testify. Taking the stand meant delving into their personal lives, exposing intimate details during a trial that received intense media coverage. Additionally, they would be subjected to harsh cross-examination. Despite these challenges, a few courageous individuals, including Stoddard, did step forward to aid the prosecution in building their case. In October 1983, Nilsen was found guilty and handed a minimum of 25 years in prison for 6 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Later, his sentence was upgraded to life imprisonment. For the remaining years of his life, Nilsen resided in prison. He utilized this time to correspond with the police, television producers, and journalists, divulging details about his crimes. He recorded extensive tapes that were later featured in a documentary, and he even penned an autobiography. Sadly, Nilsen passed away in 2018 while incarcerated at HM Prison, Full Sutton in Yorkshire, England. According to reports by the BBC, he underwent surgery for abdominal pain, but ultimately succumbed to a pulmonary embolism caused by a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. He was 72 years old.
Although Nilsen is no longer alive,
The repercussions of his heinous acts continue to resonate While one could argue that society today would be more vigilant in preventing the disappearance of young gay men, there remain marginalized groups susceptible to the same kind of predatory behavior.
Exhibited by Nilsen.
When he chose his victims, in the early 2000s, several sex workers fell victim to the still unidentified Long Island serial killer, with their remains being discovered only years later, unable to be identified. Furthermore, the year 2020 accounted for the highest number of murders of transgender individuals ever recorded in the United States, with 45 trans men and women losing their lives. Additionally, complicated jurisdictional boundaries between federal, state, and tribal law often obstruct investigations
Into the disappearances.
and killings of indigenous women on reservations, where homicide ranks as the third leading cause of death
As long as certain segments
of society are considered disposable, individuals with dangerous inclinations will continue to prey on them. Nilsen's innate desire to kill may have been unchangeable, but there is no justification,
for him evading justice for
as long as he did. With earlier intervention,
his final victim's life could have been spared.
had people not been afraid to come forward, or if law enforcement had taken missing person reports more seriously. Unfortunately, Nilsen is far from the last dangerous individual to exploit marginalized groups. It is up to the police, the media, and all of us to ensure that these individuals do not have easy targets by empowering potential victims to speak up, and by genuinely believing and supporting them when they do.